garage bands and their friends, and would love to have a story like that where you guys actually made something of that and then went on to become obviously world famous. But I want to take you back to that idea of God bringing people together and bringing some stuff together. So tell us a little bit about your walk with Christ. Is that something you also grew up with along with the music, or is that something you came to later on in life?
Well, I was raised in the Catholic Church, had my first communion and all that stuff there. I did the first communion, used to go into confessional and all that stuff, but then I never did follow through. I didn't have my confirmation. I just kind of stepped away from it, and at that time I was really getting into playing my guitar and all that stuff. So it just never really went down that path with the Catholic Church. Well, I had a strong belief in God because of what I was taught in the church, but it was never the kind of an understanding that I have now that I'm a believer. And I'll never forget my mother. My mother was the one who found a born-again believing church, and she started taking me to the church. And I ended up at the age of 15 years old accepting the Lord at that church, and started going to Sunday school, and started, studying the Bible and starting to see what the stories were and what Jesus was all about and why he was here and what he meant to me. And that was something that I held on to, and I really believed it. I totally believed it. But of course, my poor mom, had to deal with this teenager who had hormones, going crazy inside of him. And I started hanging out with a lot of my friends and started playing with all these guys that were partying and whatnot. And eventually I kind of stopped going to church. And so that kind of led me down this path of just partying and drinking and, whatever was whatever the thing was, you did it because everybody was doing it. And so I think if anything, when I got together with the Sweets, and as the story goes, a young man came in and he was a born again believer, but he was friends with the Sweets, and he had said, "Hey, you guys are all from Christian homes, and you know about the Lord. You should dedicate your music to God, and he'll take you places you'd never believe you would have been." And that's when we all rededicated our lives in the garage that day, in the rehearsal room in La Mirada. Mm-hmm. And that's when Stryper basically began, is when that happened. But I mean, still at that time, we started going to Calvary Chapel, West Covina, with the Pastor Raul Reese. And Pastor Raul is amazing guy. So we really dedicated ourselves to being there and studying and strengthening our faith as we were doing this quest as Stryper. We had people that were kind of going along with us, trying to help us and guiding us and whatnot. It was really great. It was a great time. But you go through ups and downs in your faith after you've accepted the Lord, and sometimes not everybody does, but some people fall away, and I think there was a point where we did, and we learned what a mistake it is to fall away, and we came back, and really at that point when we came back, I really dove into listening to a lot of Bible studies on the radio, and spent a lot of time just hearing teaching after teaching after teaching, and soaked it all in, and really started to build that foundation in me about what it really meant to be a Christian. And this happened after all of the Stryper success. Okay, so during the whole Stryper success thing, I was always kind of like, yeah, I'm a Christian, I believe, I go to church, blah, blah, blah. But I was always half-hearted. One part of me wanted to be a believer, but the other part wanted to be a rock star. It wasn't until I had a heartbreak when my first wife and I were going through a breakup, and that was when I dove into faith, and I just said, "Okay, Lord, I'm in your hands because I don't know what else to do about this. I have no control." And then that's when I really started putting my roots into the Word and being a part of things at church and going to med studies and whatever, and I got so rooted and grounded. And then I don't know what happened, but we ended up working things out with my first wife, and we got back together, which we had another. That we already had 2 kids at that time. That we had another child, and then we stuck it out for a while until the band started getting back together because we had broke up in 1991 or 1992, I believe. And then when the band started getting back together in 2003, 2004, 2005, we were planning to. It was looking like we were going to get back and start touring again. My first wife decided she had enough, and so she filed for divorce. We split up, and my first wife and I are really good. I got to say that right now, we're really close because we were married for 20 years and we have 3 kids. I mean, we're like family now. So I really appreciate that we've been able to work through those things, even though we're both remarried, and now we can say we're really close and like family to each other still to this day. And but that was something that I had to go through, and I had to trust the Lord through all of it, and just let His guidance show me where to go. And there were so many things that happened that were like, this had to be divine. I mean, one time while I was going through, because eventually what happened was the divorce, she decided she wanted a divorce. It was really hard for me. I couldn't deal with the idea of my family breaking up. And then I ended up coming to a point. I was working at a warehouse, working for JBL, speaker company. And I was working there. I was doing inventory and whatever, and I was a supervisor there. But man, this was just consuming me, that this was happening. And I'm going to God every night, and I felt like I had a knife in my chest. That's how much stress I was under. And I'll never forget sitting at my desk, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" And then my soon-to-be ex-wife calls me, and she starts getting on my case about alimony and all this stuff, and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, at this point, I don't even know what to say. I'm not making that much money, blah, blah, blah. And then she just went off on me, and I hung up the phone, and I just was like, I can't do this anymore, Lord. I really can't do it. I started, in the back of my mind, started stewing up the whole idea about doing myself in. Because it was so much, there was so much distress going on in my head over this. I couldn't take it anymore. And then right as soon as I started thinking that, one of the supervisors comes in, good friend of mine named Troy, comes in and he brings this box and he sets it by my table and he says, "Hey, this just came in for you." And I'm like, "Well, what? For me?" And I looked at it, and it was this tall box, and I opened it up, and I looked inside, and I saw this guitar case in there with a note stuck to the top of the case. And I pulled the note off, and I opened it up, and it was from this guy who had been in a chat room with me, because we started doing chat rooms with Win98 back in those days. And I read this note where he was in the chat room with me, and he asked me what my dream guitar would be, and I told him a Silver Sparkle Telecaster, because Don Rich from Buck Owens played one, and I said that would be my dream guitar. Well, he found a Silver Sparkle guitar in a pawn shop and sent it to me to where I work, and And I don't know how he got the address, but the note basically said, Oz, I don't know what you're going through, but I found this in a shop, and I sent it to you because I knew this was something that you wanted. He goes, and God told me to tell you that whatever you're going through, he's going to get you through it, and don't worry. And that just blew my mind. That just blew my mind. At that, and I read that to the guys that were sitting there, there's other supervisors in the room, and their mouths were all like, whoa. You know?
Yeah.
So basically that was God patting me on the back saying, you're going to be fine, Oz. Don't worry. I got you. Wow. And ever since then, I just, I just trusted him for everything.
Wow.
Yeah. That's incredible.
That's just one story. There's other stories that happened like that were divine, kind of like divine, taps on the shoulder. Right. I mean, when you're a believer, you obviously, you know that God does that. He'll speak to you in ways that only you know he's speaking to you. And boy, I tell you guys, my faith was built on so many things like that, so many things that's happened in my life, and even to the point where my health, right now my health, I'm dealing with brain tumors in my head, and I'm still playing. I'm still doing it. Every day I wake up and I go, Lord, thank you for another day. I'm breathing. I get to go see my granddaughter today, for lunch, and it's a miracle, and I'm just going to keep going and doing what I'm doing until he takes me home.
Yeah. Well, there's no question the way you explain that, Oz, that God's had his hand on you, and you responding to him throughout all of that. Just a couple things I'd like to ask you about that I've been wanting to ask you for a while. The first one would be, you mentioned about being half-hearted, as a believer, and you were a musician at the same time. And I guess there's probably others out there today who are experiencing that same thing, other Christian artists. The first thing I would say is, what advice would you have for them? And the follow-up question to that would be, obviously, as God has done so much in your life, he's also brought Annie into your life, and the ministry that she has. We'd like to hear a little bit about what God's doing with that as well.
Okay. Well, as far as the first question, I think if anything, guys, out there, if you're listening, this is all about surrender. Being a Christian means you surrender your life to Jesus. And when you surrender your life to Jesus, you get off the throne of your life and you put him on it. Okay? Just picture a circle with a chair in the middle. Okay? And everything in your life, your job, your marriage, your talents, whatever, is inside that circle. Okay? And when you're sitting on the throne, on that chair, controlling your life, all those things, it's a crapshoot of what will happen. You're going to make calls, you're going to make decisions that, are, it's always kind of like, well, I hope this works. Well, yeah, it's going to work, but it may not. And if it doesn't, then you're going to be very disappointed. You're going to become frustrated. You might even make some decisions that might take you down a bad path that you shouldn't have ever went down. Okay? But if you take yourself off the chair, the throne, so to speak, and put yourself in the circle with your life and put Jesus on that chair, he will put everything in order and make sure that your life is what it should be. And that's what I learned how to do, is surrender. Surrender my life to God and give him the opportunity to show me what path I should take in my life. And I've got peace because He's always